So, Stacey, you are the costume designer of the Beguiled. You've worked with Sofia Coppola a number of times on some of her contemporary films, like Somewhere and The Bling Ring. This is a period film set during the Civil War. So, I wonder, can you talk a bit about working in that kind of period setting after you've done so many contemporary films with Sofia? What were some of the differences between this one and those other films?
Well, I think I want to start by talking about some of the similarities. I think when you've worked with someone a lot, you develop a shorthand, and also there's an element of kind of, I don't know, I want to say like a linguistic understanding of one another, that we share a visual lexicon, so it's easy to communicate. So in that respect, it's very similar. Um, the differences obviously are in the limitations of what that means for a period piece, what's period appropriate. Like I know we kept talking about, like that scene where Edwina is wearing her shawl and how to lower her thing, because one of the common things that you would have seen in a Civil War costume, or Civil War evening attire, I don't want to call it a costume, would be an off the shoulder thing, but that was something that, we were playing up. So that kind of is always different, is that you have a limitation of historical accuracy.
Talk a bit about some of the period research that you did, because it's not just a Civil War film, but it's also set in the South. It's also about very specific kinds of women. The characters as well have their own kind of style. So what was some of the research you did?
Well, I think one of the ways that you start is just kind of understanding the history of that time. And even though we did learn about, I'm American and I learned about the Civil War in school, I don't think you realize how much you forget. As you get older, it's like if someone's not testing you on the subject, like, yes, you remember that, certain things, but you don't remember all the details. And one of the things that I feel like kind of became a new thing for me to understand the Civil War is that I recognized something in the South about textiles, is that the Civil War was more important to the South. And the reason why they held on to it so tightly was because their primary industry was cotton. And they, produced all the fabrics that then went to the North to get printed. But that's something that even though I knew, like I learned about in school, I didn't think about so much as I was growing up. I thought about it again now in 2017 or, 2016 when we were prepping the movie, because it made something about the South different to me. It made something about those characters different to me, that they're, the importance of the Civil War was different for them. It wasn't about human rights. It was also about industry and, saving something that they had, I don't know what the word is, but like it was how they survived. That was their primary industry in life. So that was the first thing. And then I feel like understanding what the textiles were and what was available to them was the next thing. And I went to the Met many times, which is such an incredible resource. If you live in the East Coast, they have a textile library that has full books of like dyeing techniques and just stuff you would never think that anyone ever held on to, but obviously they do at the Met. And fabric swatches. It was so incredible. So I started there and then went to the archives and looked through the clothes from the Civil War, obviously books, artwork, that sort of research as well.
In terms of designing costumes for these specific characters, one of the undercurrent themes of the movie is sexual repression, and how when this man comes into their lives, it disrupts them in several different ways. So can you talk about how the characters themselves influenced your designs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, obviously I feel like they're written in a certain way, and I feel like Miss Martha Farnsworth is very seemingly uptight, and she's also in charge. And I wanted her to feel that way, but also more importantly, I didn't want her to feel that way in an 1860s way. I wanted her to feel that way to someone watching it now. And I think that's part of the challenges of doing a period movie is it's not just reinterpreting something that you've seen before. It's more about kind of expressing that to a modern audience, and how do we look at it in 2016, 17? How are we able to look at a movie or a character, and what do we recognize that's also historically accurate? So one of the things I thought about for Miss Martha was one of the silhouettes that you often saw in Civil War times was a bodice that was shaped like a vest. I think there's something business suity about that. It feels like armor, and I chose to use that silhouette for her, but she's the only one that ever wore that. And she also didn't have a lot of colors, whereas like Elle was in lavender and pink, and flower prints. Miss Martha was in dots and stripes. So in that way, I feel like we tried to address Miss Martha, and then, Elle, Alicia. I don't know what's easier to call her, Elle or Alicia.
Either one.
Elle Banning / Alicia. She wore a lot of lavenders and ruffles. Like, there was something girly about her, and I feel like in part because there was an innocence to her and a childlikeness to her, but also she was coming of age, and there are moments where you see her with her, her shirt unbuttoned, which is totally not common of a woman in the Civil War. They would never have done that, even if they were slutty.
Right.
Still been buttoned up, but we unbuttoned her shirt a little bit and pushed up her sleeves. And with Kirsten, I wanted her to feel kind of virginal, Edwina, and I wanted her to feel like there was something about her that was romantic. And to me, there's something about like those diaphanous fabrics and the cream kind of flower prints that she wore that tell that story to us. So, and then, with some of the other characters who it was more about telling stories of the Civil War. So with Amy, I thought, she's a victim of famine, the fact that we don't have a lot of food, and, her clothes are a little too big. Maybe they're hand-me-downs. We never talked about exactly why Amy's clothes were too big, but there was multiple reasons. Like, is it because they were hand-me-downs from someone else at the school, or is it because they were her clothes, but now she's lost a little bit of weight? But all of those things could have existed. And same with Jane and Gowrie Rice. I had always imagined, so the design of her clothes always had panels inside, like at the hems. And I thought like, her skirt got too short. It was her skirt, but then she grew. She had a growth spurt during this time that they've been stuck in the school. So Miss Martha was like, that's not appropriate. Like, we have to, make your skirt longer. Like, it's unacceptable for your ankle to show at 13. Mm-hmm. So those are always design elements that are never talked about in the film.
Right. The film is adapted from a book, which was adapted about 46 years ago by Don Siegel and Clint Eastwood. The films are so different stylistically and tonally and in their points of view that, they don't even seem like they're based on the same book. So I'm curious, did you look at that original at all, or was it just, you just didn't even want to look at that for any of your work?
I have seen it, obviously, but in general, I try not to, I don't want someone else's impression to get impressed upon me, which is, I feel like it hinders my own creativity. So as a rule, I try to understand what I think first before I delve into visual references that someone else has done before me, because it's just too easy to get stuck on like, no, but she was wearing a blue bonnet and that, because you see it, like, we're visual people. So I feel like in general, I try to first understand how I feel and then take the reference of something else.
Well, it certainly doesn't feel like it's based on any other movie. It certainly feels like a Sofia Coppola movie in every single sense of the word. Speaking of which, I wonder if you could talk a bit about, this is your fourth collaboration with Sofia Coppola. Can you talk a bit about what that working relationship is like between the two of you and how it's developed over these films?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the great things about Sofia is that she's such a wonderful director. She really sees the whole movie, and I think we neglect that about when we think about directors. We don't really think about the fact that that's their job. Their job is to make this congruous picture within the acting and the scenery and the sets and the music and whatever. And that's one of her really great strengths, is that she's essentially a wonderful director. She can pull together all of these departments and get us all on the same page. And I love that about her. And I love that about working with her, that it's such an incredibly collaborative process, that we sit down together always, the director of photography, the production designer, Sofia, myself, and we'll sit down and talk about, you know, the mood and the lights and the music and the sets and the costumes and the fabrics, and we'll all like come with our pictures and, you know, references and whatever, and we'll fine tune this idea, which is very special. And over the years, I will say some of the things that I feel like have changed is that, you know, we talk about things much earlier on. So they're always part of, you know, people are always like, oh, you shot The Beguiled in 26 days. It's like, it took us 4 years to prep The Beguiled. But yes, we shot the movie in 26 days. It took us 4 years to prep The Beguiled, because from the moment that Anne Ross conceived of it and thought of it and like brought it to Sofia, and then Sofia thought like, oh, maybe this is something I want to do, and started working on the script, we were talking about that. Like, it was in our consciousness, not as a daily thing. Like, it's not like every day I woke up and thought, oh, my job is The Beguiled. But then I'd be looking at something and say like, oh, this is such a great like reference for The Beguiled. Like, we would just go back and forth over, you know, the time that this was being written, and just kind of getting financed and all of those moments of, you know, things that happen before movies actually get made. We were in this conceptual process together. So there's something nice about that.
Speaking of the fact that you, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, that's definitely different from the very first one I did with her, whereas I wasn't, you know, part of it from the initial conversation. I kind of came on more traditionally as someone who now was coming to do the costumes on this job. But then as time has gone on, I feel like she really does involve her people so early on. Not in a way that she's like, now come work for me every single day for the next 4 years, but just that it's on our minds. Mm-hmm. I think there's something nice about that.
Speaking of the fact that you shot this in 26 days, I was going to ask you about some of the practical things that you do as a costume designer, because, I mean, you're not just designing one dress, you've got to design multiples of these things. And, you know, on a 26-day shoot, it can be very difficult, shall we say, to get everything you need. So, I mean, what are some of the practical things that you do in preparation for being on the set for that limited amount of time?
Well, okay, so most important is I have the most incredible team of tailors and people that can help make something come to life. So that's key. And then secondly, I feel like there is like yes, there's 2 core sets for every person, so that you have a day to wash one while one is being worn, kind of thing, and like that sort of thing. And what else is a good practical concern? I don't know, but well, I guess it's a lot of logistics. It differs on every job, but also just like planning how you're going to get one dressed while the other one's getting undressed. And
right.
I can't tell you. It's just running around, a lot of running around. And I always say it feels like a single mother with a lot of children, getting them all ready for school, packing their lunches, and then sending them off.
Right. Well, it's a really great movie, and the costumes in it are pretty darn good. So congratulations, and thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure. It was really nice to meet you.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you as well. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.